All right, I want to thank everyone for coming to the BNRC meeting tonight. We've got a lot on our agenda here. First off, I'd like to point out our board up here. We've got Bill Callahan, Emmett Reardon, Suzanne Nordwick, John Cecil, and I here. Do we have anybody online?
Me and John should both be online. Mary
Okay.
Jo was going to try and get online also.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a full board tonight. First up, we have the honor of having Amy here to talk to us a little bit about Amy's with DQ. She is the waste manager. You tell them. I don't know what the official title is.
All right, yes, waste management and
Okay, there we go. And she's going to talk to us tonight about the Silverbow Creek use attainability study. That came to us, gosh, that was a while ago.
12, I think.
2012. Okay, she's going to give us an update on where that is and the Blacktail Creek project. And then we're going to have Jim give us an update on the Parrot Tailings waste removal project. Pat's going to give us a fund update. And then we have Dave Stratton with us, and he's going to give us an update on one of our small projects that goes away back to on the storm drain markers in Butte. So with that, I pass it over to you, Amy. And
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. My name, I don't know if you use Robert's Rules of Order, but I just came out of session. So Amy Steinmetz, I'm the Waste Management and Remediation Division Administrator at DEQ. This particular effort does not fit under my division, but a dozen years ago, I was in the Water Quality Standards section, and the Water Quality Standards section is the one that is responsible for use classes, classifications, water quality standards in general. So I want to give just a little bit of background before I jump in. That didn't advance. Do I do this one?
Yeah, that. Do this stuff. Hey, what's going on there? You did do it. Okay, let me figure it out for you. What's going on there?
Okay, well, I'll talk just a little bit and then when we can advance the slides, great. Oh, look, okay. So anyway, I was in the water quality standards section, and when I first started, Rod McNeil, some of you may recognize his name, was in water quality standards, and he was already looking into Silverbow Creek and the use classification there. And before I really dive into the use class in Silverbow Creek itself, I wanted to give just a really brief kind of tutorial on what water quality standards are. Water quality standards consist of 3 pieces. 1 is water body uses. 2 is numeric and narrative water quality criteria, and we actually use standards interchangeably with criteria for this, so it gets a little bit confusing. I'm going to use criteria. And then the 3rd piece is a non-degradation policy to prevent degradation of high quality waters. And Silverbow Creek, when the classifications were set back in the 1970s, early 1970s, Silverbow Creek at that time was not assigned as having any uses. So the use class assigned to that was I, which we don't really know what the I stood for. I've heard various things over the years, but essentially it just wasn't assigned any uses. However, it was the goal of the state that the water would eventually meet all of our uses. And that's actually outlined in the rule itself. So all of our use classes are set in rule in the administrative rules of Montana.
Sorry.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll just click through these really quick. We talked about uses, water quality criteria, and non-degradation. I highlighted uses because that's what I'm going to be talking about with the I class and the use class. And what that came out of that was the use attainability analysis. So water body uses, these are the uses that we assign to the various waters in Montana. Drinking water, aquatic life, recreation, industry, and agriculture. And then those uses are categorized into use classes. And this is what each state water is assigned one of these use classes in our rules. So A closed, A1, B1, B2, B3, C1I, which doesn't have any uses, and these all have various uses assigned to them. The A uses are drinking water, salmona. I'm not going to go into all of that, but what you need to know here is that each of these use classes then drive the water quality criteria that have to be met for those water bodies. For example, I did mention drinking water with A, because drinking water is a use for an A-class stream, whether it's closed or A1, there's subtle distinction, has to meet drinking water standards. B1 also has to meet drinking water standards, B2, C1, because we're going to talk about it in a little bit, I'll talk about that one. That one needs to meet salmon fisheries, no drinking water, but they all have different standards that they have to meet. And those, again, those are set in rule. So Silverbow Creek, finally getting to that, and we're talking about the main stem from the confluence of Blacktail Creek to Warm Springs Creek. This was, as I said, classified as I in the 70s. And if you're wondering what the specific rule is, it's the Administrative Rules of Montana 1730-607. And it doesn't have any official uses, it just has the goals. Back in about 2011, there was recognition of significant improvement in Silverbow Creek, and there was interest in reclassifying the creek to designate uses for the creek. So Rod had started this effort. I came in, I joined with him. We started looking at what uses Silverbow Creek was supporting at that time and what was attainable, because when we do use classes, it's not just what's met right now, it's what's attainable in the future. So we started looking at that in 2011. And the process that we use is called a use attainability analysis. And this is just an in-depth analysis of the conditions of the stream to determine existing and attainable uses. Forgot a word there. And this is the process that we go through. First, we identify the water body characteristics. Second, we analyze the data. 3, draft the use attainability analysis report and the regulatory language. And then 4, it has to be adopted in rule because we have to replace what's already in rule. So Rod and I went through that process. We identified the water body characteristics, we analyzed the data, we looked at chemistry, we looked at the microbiology, we looked at the fish populations. We also did a survey, a use survey, random survey of the population to ask about the current uses and what people wanted to see. So we went through that process and then we drafted the report and the regulatory language. We got almost to rulemaking. And then the effort stopped, and there was a reason for that. When we were looking at this, the I class, it's very specific in the rule what standards need to be, or what criteria need to be applied in permits. And because permits, well, water quality standards themselves are written to protect uses, in permits, there is a technical and economic feasibility component to those. So with an I-class stream, the permit limits can, in some cases, because it's based on the condition of the receiving water, the permit limits can be less protective than the other classes. So in the water quality standards section, that is the view that we were using, saying, look, this is going to be better for the stream. However, the reason we stopped here after step 3 was because the consent decree negotiations were going on at the time. And what we found is that because it is the goal of the state that an I-class stream meet all uses, and because in the Superfund process, we're taking an undesirable condition and we're making it better, the interpretation of the rule is that we were applying all of the most stringent standards when we were moving forward through the consent decree. Because we were in that negotiation at the time, our attorneys said, stop, if you do this, this will slow down the process and we'll have to look differently at the standards that we're using. So we put it down, we didn't go through rulemaking. But what we had come up with through our analysis was that we were going to recommend C1 for Silverbow Creek from the confluence of Blacktail Creek down to Warm Springs Creek. So that's where we ended in 2013. It was a pause. We're at a point now where we could revisit that and go back and we can look at doing a use change, use class change. So the next thing that I think I have in here, I have the comparison of I class versus C1, and you can see their I class really doesn't have any uses, but goals. It's aspirational. But under C1, these are the actual uses that we said were either met or were attainable. Bathing, swimming, and recreation, growth and propagation of salmonid fishes and associated aquatic life, waterfowl and fur bearers, industry and agriculture. Those were the designated uses we were going to suggest. Now, how do we change this? If there's interest in changing the use class, DEQ just opened the triennial review of our water quality standards. So about every 3 years, we open up all of our water quality standards for public comment. And if people have new information, if they have a request for some kind of a change for some reason, they're able to reach out to the department and recommend or suggest or ask for a change. So this opened last Friday. The timing of this meeting, and Elizabeth asking me to come was very timely since this just opened. It does apply to all of our water quality standards, and this of course includes the assigned use classes, and the public comment period is open through June 28th. If you have questions on the triennial review, I did put the current water quality standards and modeling section supervisors contact information here. I also forwarded the link where you can visit if you're interested in commenting or learning more. I sent that to Elizabeth and Pat, I think last week, so they could forward that on. And I think with that, I'll take any questions you have and hopefully I can answer them. That's good.
Do we have questions from the council? Okay, we'll open it to.
You have questions of the council on the television? You have some members out there.
Oh,
I
I can't tell.
just thought they should have it.
Yeah, good point.
I have some questions, which you're probably gonna take back to the powers that be and whatever, but one of the things that we want to know, BNRC wants to know, is when we're gonna get this $5 million back. And can you give us some kind of a timeline so we know what we can expect and that money's gonna be coming back? And so if you don't have the answers to that, we'd sure like to find out.
Chair Erickson and Mr. Callahan. I can just speak to that briefly. So you're talking about the stream side Tailings operable unit transfer. DEQ did commit to that transfer a couple of years ago. Of course, I'm aware of that. I've been looking through some of the letters that have gone back and forth between DEQ and EPA. You might be aware that in order for that transfer to happen, EPA needs to sign off on that. So they did give us 3 things that we had to meet in the letter. I think the last one that had to be met is institutional control, an institutional control plan. So we've gone back and forth on that a little bit, but the last I heard is that we've got that plan ready to send to NRDP for their review here in a couple of weeks. So that's getting really close. So the EPA had 3 things that they needed us to meet. The other thing is that we also we have to be able to meet our obligation under the remedy. We have to be able to make sure that we're going to have enough funding to do the remedy and to conduct operation and maintenance for 30 years. And that's 30 years from the time that I think remedy starts at each one of the units. So another thing that we're doing, and I want to be perfectly open and honest and transparent about this, is that we are currently looking at, we're looking through, I figured I was going to get this question. So taking a fresh look at the projections just to make sure that everything lines up. And we have been working with NRDP on this. They know that we're looking at this, and I think by July, we'll be ready to come back and say exactly where we're at with that.
So you would be able to give us an answer by July when we can expect to see those funds directed back towards BNRC.
I think that's.
What are
very
the three things, ICP plan?
I don't remember what the other two were, and I bet some of the people in this room would remember the other two things. One of them had to do with groundwater.
Groundwater impacts and sediments. And,
Parcel 26.
parcel.
Oh, that's right. And parcel 26, I think we're there on that.
I have another question.
Okay.
So it's been over a year since DEQ started working on the preliminary plan for what's going to happen on Blacktail Creek. And we would really like to know where you are with that, how much of that's been completed, what we can expect to see down the road. And I think mainly because the community basically would like to know when we're going to start getting that mess cleaned up.
And I actually am talking about that next. So if you don't mind, if
Go
there
for
are
it.
other questions, maybe on the sustainability analysis.
Beth, did you have one?
Yeah, so, first off, thank you for talking about this. We appreciate you being here, being as a member of the public. A triennial review is a review that happens every 3 years, right? So the last time it happened 3 years ago. I mean, how many, and the triennial review looks at the standards, or it looks at particular streams and how they're classified?
That's a good question. So it looks at all of our water quality standards in any of our rules. So it looks at, I think if we actually, I don't want to get too in the weeds. It looks.
No, so it's the rules and the system, not this creek and that lake, and it's just the overall picture.
It's everything.
So, but not a specific category of a specific lake, or it looks at that too.
Only if we would get a comment on it,
Okay.
but anybody could comment on a specific creek or a specific lake.
So I sort of hate to say this, but 3 years ago, we had a different government in Helena
Mhm.
with different leadership and different priorities. I don't, and how many changes happened in these rules and the system when it was done 3 years ago?
Ooh, that's a good question. I don't think there were many, but you would be commenting on the rules as they exist right now. Yes.
But I didn't know if the process was every 3 years, we totally throw out the rules.
No, okay, thank you for clarifying. No, we don't. Our rules are, I would say, fairly static. We don't typically make a lot of changes. Our water quality standards have minor changes throughout the years. I want to say the last change was about 3 years ago when we added selenium standards for Lake Koocanusa and the Flathead area. That was the last time, and that was one, relatively small in the universe of all of our standards rules. Yep, we definitely don't throw them all out and start over. That would be a massive effort.
Right.
Yeah.
Beth, did you have a question?
Yeah, this is Pat Knee. Folks could announce when they ask a question, their names, so we can get that in the record.
So my name was Beverly Hartline when I asked those.
Yeah, and previously it was Bill Callahan. I do have a question for you, Amy. So
What's your name?
mine is Parrot. So in the slide where you had it's open for comment now. So if we are interested in seeing Silver Creek be reclassified, what would be the process for us or members of the public to go about initiating that so that the state would consider it?
Sure. Couple routes. You could probably search for triennial review DEQ, Montana DEQ, and it would probably bring up our page. But maybe if anybody in the room here is interested, you can either let me know and I can send you the link, or Elizabeth or Pat both have the link as well. But on the page, there's a letter that's linked on the triennial review page, and that letter gives specific instructions for how you can comment. And I would suggest if you're going to write a comment on, well, any of the water quality standards, but if you wanted to request a different use class, specify Silverbow Creek from the main stem, the confluence from, I mean, be specific about what it is that you want. You might even refer to the specific rule. I had that up. That was 1730-607. And why you think it's important, and then they'll consider that. But I think the why is really helpful. So that would be my suggestion. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, John Sesso, you're telling us that the recommendation from the department based on the studies is to reclassify it as C1.
It was.
Was?
Yes, good question. Sorry, Madam Chair, Mr. Sesso. That was our recommendation in 2013. So there are 10 more years of data between then and now. So if the water quality standards section decides to move forward, if they receive all of the comments, what they would do then is prioritize, probably based on number of comments that they receive, the impact, the number, the amount of resources that would go in. And one of our water quality standards folks who currently works there actually already reviewed the report from 2013. And he said, this is good, a good solid foundation. They could probably use the work that Rod and I had done before, but they would add more data to it. And so it could be that the recommendation that came out of that analysis could change from C1 to B1. It could possibly change, but they would go through the use attainability analysis process again, just to make sure that we're current with today's data. And then that's what they would move forward with. So probably the best recommendation, if you want to see a reclassification of the stream, would simply be to reanalyze the I class and whether that should be upgraded or changed to a different use class. And then they would go through the whole process because it does have to be science-based. Does that make sense?
No.
Oh.
So it makes sense to me that if you have filed and have 10 years of data.
Yep.
That you as the water quality division, Ms. Makarowski.
Yep.
Would make a recommendation on what the data says is the appropriate new or recommended classification for the stream.
Yes.
And then we would comment on that.
Yes.
So what would we comment on now? I mean, we don't have access to this data.
No, okay. I apologize for not being clear. The process right now, just opening the water quality standards, you all can say the I class was set in 72. Much has changed since then. Please look at the use class and see if it needs to be changed. Could be as simple as that, because the water quality standards section has 3 or 4 people, and they're looking at standards across the entire state. They're looking at criteria, the numbers, they're looking at so much. So if you give them things to look at, then they'll prioritize those. But then, yes, what you said, the analysis, that's exactly what they'll do. Then they'll go through the rulemaking process, and then you'll have the opportunity to comment on that. This is just opening it up and saying, State of Montana, what are you interested in seeing done differently in our water quality standards?
In general or on Silverbow Creek?
Any and all, in general. But you can comment on Silverbow Creek because that's part of our water quality standards.
Right, but I mean, as a lay person, I remember when, what was the guy's name?
Rod McNeil?
What was his name?
Rod McNeil.
Yeah, he came through and he said that, we were gonna go to C1, and we were quite interested at the time of what the new designation was gonna require of anybody who was discharging into
Yep.
Silverbow Creek, and we were a little concerned at the time, was before Silverbow to put in the new water treatment plant and this impaired stream stuff, and et cetera. So that, I don't know what we're supposed to comment on now, and it would seem to me it would be better for us to be told what your recommendation is before we would comment on Silverbow Creek. I mean, as far as, you know, the classification system and what we're supposed to look at statewide, I leave it to the science people in the room to make a comment on that. Elizabeth, or somebody who understands what that is, but for a layperson, I mean, I'd like to know what your recommendation is for the stream, and then what that recommendation means in terms of practical impacts to anybody who's discharging on the stream.
Okay, so maybe I'll just try to say this a little bit differently. Any comments that you provide right now would help the standards section prioritize the work that they do. Because it's really possible that they have enough projects to work on over the next 10 years that Silverbow Creek doesn't rise to the top, you know, for 10 years. So if the community is interested in the standards section, taking a look at a possible different classification,
An I class or then C1?
the current class.
An I class?
Yes, if you want them to prioritize it in the next couple of years, you can say, hey, I think the I class is wrong. Please pick this up and run with it. You could do that. And then, yes, then what would happen is they would do their analysis with current data. They would do community meetings. They would have the same conversations that you had back then about the implications of changing the standards. So that it's a two-step process. This one's really just, what are you interested in? Okay,
So without that, it probably wouldn't be prioritized, or you don't really know.
I don't know.
Okay,
It might not be though.
yeah.
Bill Callahan, is there going to be, will the public be able to have access to that 10 years worth of data so that we can, if we're going to make comments, it'd be nice to be able to make some kind of an informed decision based on what we know to date. I think that's what John was asking to begin with, and it's pretty hard. Well, you know, can I water ski on Silverbow Creek or what? I mean, whatever it is, you know, how is it? How are we going to be able to make informed comments if we don't have access to all the new data that's there?
Are you talking about for the triennial review? Or are you talking about once the section picks it up, does their analysis at that point?
Well, it would seem if we were going to make comments that were meaningful, that we would have to have access to all of this data that apparently has been compiled. And I mean, I'm confused.
Okay. Okay, so at this point, if we get to the point where we want to go to rulemaking to change the use class, you would get you would have access to a copy of the use attainability analysis report. You would have all of the information. We would have the data compiled and analyzed. At this point, all of that information is all over the place. We would have to be able to pull it together. But what you could look at to make a recommendation at this point is, now you all know that I-class streams have no designated uses. And you can look at Silverbow Creek and you can say, but wait, there are fish in there and people are using the stream to recreate in. So that can be your basis for a recommendation right now. But when we get to the rulemaking stage where we would change from an I class to a C1 or a B1, at that point, you would absolutely have the report and the data. And you'd be able to read that, and that's what you would comment on.
So a follow-up on that. So it would seem to me that the community then would be able to, the more comments that we make and the more people that get involved in this, we would have a better chance of putting this evaluation higher up the list instead of sitting around and waiting for, like you had just said, for 10 years. Or I mean, is that where we're at with this?
That's probably accurate. I mean, I could check with Katie, but for me, if I were assessing and prioritizing, if I had 200 comments, that would probably flag it for me more than if I received one. And then I had a health risk, another situation, you're weighing priority, but 200 people, yeah, that's pretty significant.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Beth.
So, Beverly Hotline, again. Where does DEQ consider Silverboat Creek extends from? Does it start at Texas Avenue? Or does it start where Blacktail Creek comes in? Because I think that is potentially an important thing for community members here in this committee to comment on, even without having any data.
The portion of Silverbow Creek from Texas Avenue to Montana Avenue is not classified. So what we're talking about today with the use classification only applies confluence of Blacktail Creek to Warm Springs Creek. That's what we're talking about with this one, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other question? Go ahead, Joe.
So would it include, I mean, that's a big question. Would it include the portion that, the Warm Springs, Joe Griffin? Would this include Warm Springs Ponds? Because that is Silverbow Creek, and it seems like somewhat of a different entity altogether.
That's a good question. I have to look into that and get back to you.
Okay, Callahan. I was just curious on, and I don't want to put you on the spot, maybe somebody can answer. Did we have a classification that is a goal we were supposed to meet in the consent decree? Or is that something that's not part of our consent decree on what our goal was for this classification?
I think it would be, I don't think classification would be addressed in a consent decree.
It's the apples and oranges. We have goals for Silverbow Creek relative to not letting any metals get in there. This is a TMDL and Parrot stream thing that's been going on forever. I mean, we have been I-class since, the 70s. And then when they passed the TMDL law, then you started down this path, just like you said, and then we came to a head in 2013 and, if we were gonna be C1 and we were in good shape but that never happened. So it's different.
Any questions online?
Yeah, this is Courtney. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Perfect. Amy, I just have a simple, and it's a personal question. I always try to get to know the speakers.
Okay. Should I be nervous?
Yes.
Steinmetz.
You're cutting in and out, Courtney.
Oh, okay. I'll make it quick. Are you related to John Steinmetz?
Yes, I was related to a John Steinmetz who passed away like a year ago. Is that?
I'm not sure. He was the state geologist in Montana for a while, and then he went to Indiana.
No, different guy.
Okay, I just had to ask because he was my neighbor for a while, and
Okay.
he was a good guy. So it's just a sidebar comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. Right, if there's no other questions, we could go on to Blacktail Creek.
Okay, and I was going to put together slides for Blacktail Creek, but because I am pretty new to the program, I ended up just not going that route. I've got some thoughts written down, and I want to start with more of an introduction than I gave you for the sustainability analysis presentation. So I've been with DEQ for over 18 years, and I've been in my current position for less than a year. So I'm learning a lot. I am not intimate with the Blacktail Creek project, but I'm going to do my best to walk through what I do know and where we're at and make some commitments. Maybe I'll move and see if that helps. Make commitments that I can, only that I can keep.
Somebody needs to mute himself.
If you folks online could mute your mics, that would stop the reverb, I think. Couple more still need to mute. Thank you.
As I mentioned, been with DEQ over 18 years. I have biology or degrees in biology and chemistry from Carroll College. And I worked at energy labs before in Helena before I moved to the state. So science is still, when I get to do it, which isn't very often, it's still the most fun part of my job for me. If I get hold of a report, if I have time to look at a report, that is really fun for me. I still really like that part of the job, although it's a very small part of my job. Since working at DEQ, I've overseen petroleum release cleanups. That's where I started with DEQ in 2004. I've written water quality standards. You heard me talk about that a bit. Worked in the Public Water Supply Bureau, and then I moved into the Water Quality Division Administrator position, which is equivalent to my position, but in a different division. And now, as I mentioned, Water Quality Division Administrator. And in my current division, I have 3 bureaus. There's a reason why I'm telling you all this, so bear with me. 3 bureaus, one of which is the Superfund, AML, and Construction Bureau. I've got a new bureau chief, Katie Garson-Forbes. Some of you know her. She worked in federal Superfund before, took a couple other jobs, and now she's back as the bureau chief. So she's relatively new. Now within Katie's bureau, she's got 4 sections. The Federal Superfund Bureau is one of those sections. And Will George was the project manager for Blacktail Creek, but he recently took another job within that bureau. So as I said, there was a reason I was mentioning all of that. I want to point out that there is a lot of transition right now, and we are, that Will's position is out right now for hire. We posted that. Unfortunately, it has been difficult to hire scientists recently. Sometimes we have to go out 2 or 3 times before we're able to get scientists hired into positions, but we are actively recruiting for his position. And as soon as we have that person hired, we have the opportunity, the next meeting, we will bring him or her to meet all of you. So we're in transition, but thankfully we do have a lot of consistency within DEQ. We've got in the Butte area. So we've got Dave Bowers and Daryl Reed, other project managers who work on Butte. We've got Carolina Ballou. She's the Federal Superfund Section Supervisor. We've got Kevin Stone in the back and Moira Davin, our public information officers, and then John Morgan, our attorney, a couple others. But even though we have some newbies, we have people with institutional knowledge who are helping us come up to speed and helping us through this transition. So while we're currently without a project manager for Blacktail Creek, and I can't speak to technical details, I do want you to know that everyone at DEQ, from the director, you heard from him a meeting or 2 ago, to the deputy director, to me, to Katie, to Carolina, and to our whole team, we are committed to the community of Butte and to this project, to Blacktail Creek. And because this project falls within my division, I am ultimately responsible for its successful completion. And so I am very committed to this project. Because of that, I thought it might be helpful to let you know a little bit more about me and about how I lead, because that will help, I think, help you understand what you can see from a project manager and the efforts that we'll be making. So besides loving the science, one of my strengths is in relationship building. I enjoy, even though I'm an introvert, I love just one-on-one conversations, getting to know people. And in every job I've had within the agency at DEQ over the years, there's been one consistent factor that's critical to moving projects forward, and that is strong professional relationships built on good communication and mutual trust. And where we haven't had those things fall apart. They either go off the rails, they are not efficient, or we end up with a result that isn't good for one party or the other. So strong relationships are something that I am deeply committed to. One of the specific areas where Katie and Carolina and I have recently been working on building better relationships is with NRDP. And we have different regulatory authorities. Because of that, we have different individual goals, but we are both committed to the state of Montana and to the community of Butte. So it makes sense for us to work together on our projects as we move things forward. So we are working on that relationship. I also just want to say that I really do appreciate Doug and Harley and their team for all of the conversations that we've had recently. One of the things that we're considering is whether an MOU could help contribute to the success of Blacktail Creek. So just so you know, that is something that we're currently talking through. Something else I'm committed to is being as transparent as I can within the law. And so to that end, I did want to talk just briefly about the budget for Blacktail Creek, as you asked about, and then also to make a follow-up commitment to you on that. So as you know, DEQ received $10.5 million in December of 2020 and another 10.5 in December of 2021. To date, salaries, benefits, and contracting totals about $300,000 over the last 2 years. That includes contracting that has been done in the last couple of years, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Out of the 21 million, we're committed to giving 1 million. I actually just learned this recently, but to the county after remedy is complete. And then of course, the remainder goes to NRDP when we're done for restoration. At this point, of course, we don't know what that will be, but here are some of the commitments that I want to make to you for Blacktail Creek specifically. We'll work with the community, we'll work with other state agencies, we'll work with EPA, we'll listen, we'll try to learn and understand everybody's perspectives before we move forward. Our commitment is to a successful project that is protective, cost-effective, efficient, in that we want to be ready when the succession of projects going down the corridor, when it's our turn, we want to be ready without any delays. And then finally, we want to make sure that we integrate remedy and restoration where we can. And so that's where working closely with NRDP comes in. I also want to mention, of course, that in our work, we'll be following the consent decree. So don't want to leave that out of the commitments that I'm making. That's important as well. The other thing I want to commit us to for Blacktail Creek is being transparent about the budget. So I will commit to coming to you on a regular basis, whether that's yearly or more frequent if you request it, with updates on where we're at with budget. So before I wrap up and take questions, this is supposed to be a Blacktail Creek Riparian Actions update. DEQ submitted a pre-design investigation work plan and a draft sampling and analysis plan for comment in January. We have received a couple of comments. One of those was a comment letter from EPA in March. And Will prepared a response to comments before he transferred. However, due to some of the comments in the EPA letter, along with the opportunity to take a fresh look with the new project managers, get fresh eyes on the project, we're stepping back and assessing where we're at to ensure that the project is on track to be as successful as we can possibly be and to meet the parameters that I met above. So long term, just so you know what will be coming, we've got some administrative things to take care of first. Pre-design, design, remedial action, and then, like I said, the remedial action and the timing of that will depend on the sequencing of projects in the corridor, but we don't want to delay things. So when it's our turn, we want to be on the bench ready to go up to bat. So with that, I'm sure you have questions. I will do the best to answer what I can, but I will follow up. I should grab a pen, or
I got you.
Kevin's taking notes. So whatever I can't answer, we'll get back to you.
Okay, I think we'll go with the council first. Anyone on the council have questions on Blacktail Creek? Go ahead, John.
This is John McKee.
wanna go
Sorry, is that
first?
Cecil or McKee?
Go ahead, John McKee on the phone.
Thank you. Comment and maybe a question in there too. I think there was a profound level of disappointment with the previous project manager and the approach to the speed up, like how long it took him to get on board, how long it took him to even get caught up and then understanding what was going on. And I think that I would encourage you in your selection to, I don't know, find someone a little ready and more prepared to step into the role. You've got a real frustrated community. I think, you know, it's becoming pretty obvious that the cleanup now is going to take longer than the damage took. And that's becoming a real disappointment to this community. And I think that every time we lose a project manager, it just turns into another couple of years of delay while we go out and we search. And I think you just really want to be conscious of the fact that our community is not DEQ's life's work. And it's probably not a question in there, but certainly a comment to encourage and hope for you to find good candidates and do good work. But we're really frustrated at how well it's gone so far. So thank you for my comment. Thank you for the comment.
Yeah, thank you. And I can appreciate the frustration on that. We don't like to see turnover either, and we will absolutely hire the best candidate we can possibly get.
So John, so is this a linear thing? I mean, can't you as the person in charge, pick someone that's already on board to tell them to do this job?
That's a good question. We have talked about transferring another project manager to this project. Part of the problem is that Will is not the only one who has transferred out. We also have somebody else who has taken kind of a detail and a supervisor position. So now we're down 2 project managers in our federal Superfund section. We've talked about other options. You know, if we don't get a project manager out of the next round of hiring, and we try to hire pretty quick, we shoot for 21 days, then we'll look harder at trying to transfer somebody, whether it's within federal Superfund program or another program. But as the other John already pointed out, we want somebody who can come in and come up to speed very quickly and move this forward. So we won't let it go long before we figure out something, but at this point, we are just trying to hire for this position specifically.
So, who, in the meantime, who's going to the design meetings with respect to the other projects in the corridor to validate, verify, and stay current on, you know, you're making a commitment that you'll be ready when the Blacktail Creek project has to be ready in the sequence. I mean, it's my understanding they're have gone out for bid for Lexington and Buffalo, you know, 2 of the 7 projects, and the other 2 are gonna be out next year. And I'm assuming if you're gonna do this in some type of sequence, that the Blacktail's gotta be done before they go across Montana Street and do the BRW. So who do you got making sure that you are gonna be ready when it's your turn to do Blacktail? Cause from where I sit, you don't even have an RFP out on the street to do the design yet. And so that, I'm assuming it's gonna take 8 months, a year. So we're already a year out for Blacktail, and if the other projects are gonna start coming online. So while you're dealing with your crisis of people, can't you get somebody to you know, hire out something? You know, I mean, it seems like you're behind here, and you're not gonna catch up if you're gonna have to bring on a new guy, and then new guy's gotta, or gal's gotta get up to speed, and then, you know, thinking that this is the recipe for disaster, you're not gonna be ready to be in the right spot with your design ready to go out to bid for the Blacktail piece. I understand that, you know, everybody's got to take their turn because there's only a limited amount of room in the treatment facility to collect the groundwater and move it over there while we're doing the cleanup, but two of them are gonna be getting done now. I'm hoping the other two are gonna go out for bid next year, and if you're not ready, we're gonna miss some opportunities to do these projects in the right sequence and really maybe at the right concurrently. This linear approach is bothering me.
I hadn't heard anything about the linear approach being a concern yet, but based on my conversations within DEQ and with NRDP, we feel comfortable with a couple month delay while we bring a project manager in. But like I said, if it goes much longer than that, we will make sure that we have a contingency plan and get somebody in there. But based on my understanding of where we're at, it was my understanding that we're okay with a little delay.
Okay, and then one more question on this 300,000, that includes the so-called data gap analysis that's been done and the salary paid to Will George to date. So you've only spent 300 grand.
Correct.
And then do you get, where's the 20.7 million now? Is it in the bank and is it growing interest?
It's growing interest. When I come and give a financial report, I'll make sure that all of that is included.
That interest earned on the 21 million accrues to the Butte site account as it's outlined in CD?
Yeah.
So the position that DEQ has posted, what is the description for that position? You know,
I did not read the position description. I could get that for you if you'd like to see it. And if any of you know anybody who might want to work at DEQ and would be a great fit for this, please send them our way. We would love the help. Yeah, I'll get you the position description.
Is the 300,000 that's already been spent, or maybe you don't know this yet, but can we use the documents and the information that came out of that, or are we going to be kind of starting from ground zero again?
Good question. I don't think we'll be starting from ground zero, but like I said, we want to step back, see where we're at, make sure that things are going in the right order. That we're tackling this the right way. There may be some adjustments that might need to be made, but we're not scrapping. We're not scrapping work that's been done to date.
So just a quick follow-up on the money. It would seem to me that if you got 10 million at the end of 2020 and 10.5 or both at the end of 21, you've earned more than enough. You probably have more than $21 million in the bank then. Even spending, 1% on 20 million is 20 grand, right?
I can't answer exactly.
Well, we would like to know that.
Yeah.
So could you keep us apprised
Yeah.
of where the money's at, the interest earned as it relates to the money out and the current balance in the fund?
Yes.
Thanks.
One more quick question from John McKee. I'm on your website. What job is it? It doesn't seem to be listed.
But we've got a fire alarm going off right now, and so.
They're all muted.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Did you say John had a question?
He was asking about the posting. He said he was looking for it. and it
Oh,
wasn't,
okay,
Yeah.
that was that, John.
Yeah, and I can answer that, and I actually, Daryl is attending the design meetings. So we do have somebody at those, and we'll have, like I said, we'll have people in-house to help bring the new person up to speed. Official answer, I think. You don't have everybody.
Well, it would seem to me that the next logical step is to
Suzanne, you got
get
a
a
meeting, we got a lot of excitement.
I'm assuming you're not gonna do the design in-house.
Yep.
So, get a design company recruited and on board. And I don't know that there needs to be any analysis done by the new project manager to, get somebody going in that regard. So I would encourage you to maybe consider that step, because they could fill in a lot of blanks for the RPM while we were getting up to speed. So especially this concept of, getting the thing sequenced properly. And I'm also thinking in terms of that, my recollection anyway, the work plan here for the Blacktail project is inextricably tied to the East Tailings project because of the groundwater barrier that's got to be put in to execute the two projects without screwing up the groundwater, so it just seems to me that your consultant needs to be like in the room dealing with the other sequenced projects in order to make sure, A, your project's not gonna screw anything up, but B, take advantage of some of the economies of scale of getting the projects done somewhat concurrently. So
Yeah.
maybe get somebody to get an RFP on the street to hire, the consultant who's gonna be doing the design work on behalf of the RPM.
And some of the pre-design work still needs to be completed, so we're not to design yet. But we're moving in the right direction, and yes, work will be able to continue to happen as the person's coming up to speed,
Yeah.
but yeah, there's, I'm learning there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Are we ready to kind of reconvene here? Think we got everybody? I see Dan missing, but that's it. I think we'll go ahead and go. Any other questions for Amy on Blacktail Creek? I guess I'll ask just one more.
Okay.
So on the pre-design stuff,
Mhm.
is work still being done on that?
Well, like I mentioned, Will did do a response to EPA's comments.
Okay.
EPA had several comments on the pre-design work plan. He responded to those. We're just looking at some of the technicalities with EPA's letter, just to make sure we're still on track. But then we'll be able to move that forward. We just want to make sure we have all of our ducks in a row.
Yeah. So, but it's kind of stopped now, though,
Well,
until you get that new.
Yeah, well, and EPA will need to, once we submit the response to comments, they'll need to respond as well, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right.
And Mr. McKee, did you get your question answered? I know there are other people online who could have answered that question, probably did. Oh, okay. Never mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming. Are you ready, Jim?
Yeah. So, I know things have gone longer than we sort of all expected. The fire alarm, but can you guys, whoever's online, can you guys see the slides?
No, we're still seeing Amy's presentation.
Yeah. Hold on. It's always something. Looking for
I'm
something.
kind of still my thumb drive.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't need to share my whole.
You're
life with you.
mic'd.
I know. I was talking to John. Okay, can you guys see that?
We can.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, so I don't have anything polished like the previous presentation.
Do you have stuff there?
See.
I'll send you the presentation.
Oh, no intentions there. All right, so what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna give you update on the Parrot. I'll talk a little bit about budget. And then Elizabeth asked me just to clarify some issues about some of our the cleanup standards and our fill standards for the Parrot. So I'm just only gonna talk about that. I'm not gonna talk about some broader issues. So here's our most recent stitched together aerial photograph of the site. Zoom out a little bit. So remember, we fly a drone up and we take a bunch of different pictures and then we stick them together so you can see the whole site again. Down here at the bottom left, you can see the Civic Center. You can see the fill, the north side of the parking lot that we built out last year for the TV show. So they had a place to put all their stuff. So that's sort of like a blue top there. And what's changed here is you can start seeing some vegetation coming in here, and that's not vegetation actually we want in the donut hole. That's some weeds coming in that came in with the soil. So we're going to deal with that. But you see all the ET covers coming in here, and the last piece was covering the slag on the railroad embankment. And you can see this, and I got some really good sort of oblique angle shots of that so you can actually see the layers in the ET cover surface.
Jim, if you go to slideshow, will that make that bigger?
Yeah, probably that. If a little bigger, maybe a little clearer. So again, you can see the whole site here, all the way up to follow our haul road, all the way up. This was the stockpile area. So some of our waste went there, right? And some went all the way over to the lunchroom dump. So that's where we are currently. Here's an oblique angle. So again, this is the parking area, the blue top parking area, where the TV crews were. And here's the interesting part, at least I find interesting. So we're constructing the ET cover on this slag, right? It's approximately 100,000 cubic yards of slag that we dug up from that phase one. Remember, it's all poured and hard and really difficult to get out of the ground. Got crushed down and we laid it all in here. Now that slag leaches. Doesn't leach as bad as maybe some of the other contaminants, but it still leaches. And so we didn't haul this off-site as waste, but we're treating it as waste by tucking it under this ET cover, and it's well above groundwater, right? So it has no way of impacting groundwater because you don't allow infiltration and it's not sitting in it. And so the layers you're seeing here is the bottom layer here is that capillary break material. And I think some of you have actually handled some of this because on tours we sort of handed out. So it's a honeycomb plastic with geotextile on both sides. And that's critically important for this because it's a hydraulic break between all the moisture, you know, snow melt and rain that's stored in these upper layers from keeping it down away from the slag itself. So that's at the bottom. Then we've got approximately 3 feet of very specific type of soils that we got out at Ramsey Flats, back out of the Ulen Ranch. So we looked all over to find this stuff, but it has certain properties that will hold water, but it will also release water. So that's critical. Like you wouldn't want to put a bunch of clay there because clay is really good at holding water, but it's not good at releasing it. So this was very specifically identified for its ability to hold water and then release it, because that's how this cap works. It's modeled after all the precipitation we get to hold it all and then release it through evaporation or transpiration of the plants. And so on top of that, then we have our actual growth media. It obviously has a lot more organics, and this is a lot hard. This is hard to find material in itself of itself, but this is where we first established the plants. So again, we've got a seed mix, sort of an amended PAL seed mix of what's used on the breeze caps, but to include some more woody species. And I expect, we haven't worked out the details, that in the future, maybe when some of the Robert has that weekend where people go out planning and stuff, that we might be doing some of that on our ET covers. It certainly can take woody species on the covers themselves. So the rest of what you're seeing here is storage of materials. We have some permanent green spaces that we got to get growth media on. And then I'm going to talk specifically about the south side and what we're doing with the parking lot, and to remove some additional waste. Can't really see it that clearly in this view, but there's a bunch of stormwater lines here that run through the site that we replaced. We just dug all the waste around there. It wasn't worth trying to leave it in place and remove waste. It was actually more cost effective just to hog all the waste out and replace the lines. They were old and you know, only half functioning.
Storm or sanitary?
We did both storm and sanitary. We pretty much have everything here. We had storm and sanitary, and the rebuilt road, I'll show you, we have an 8-inch water line that used to go to the shops and end. We brought it all the way through and connected it up with the neighborhood on the west side. It's a new DEQ requirement, so there's no dead end lines or anything. So, and then we're putting electrical, Northwest Energy is putting electrical and gas in the road too. So,
Were you able to leave the HDD in place? on
yes,
this
we worked
north
around that. Didn't touch it. No touching the HDD. Yeah. The one thing we were not touching. This is that sliver in the center, got all the soil there. I think you guys, probably most people have seen that live here because you drive along it and see it. So we thought that looked pretty good. Again, so there was some slag that went in here. This was sort of an overflow area for slag. So it came up a little bit. It didn't come up as much as maybe we'd have liked, but it looks a lot better and it did come up. And of course, that's all graded to drain and such.
And you got these pictures with the drone?
Yeah. Yeah. It's cheap and they look good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's looking back over the slag and the ET cover, and you can see the distinct layers, getting growth media, this absorption layer, if you want to think about it, and then the capillary break, which sits right on top of the slag. So that was those big rolls of poly that have been sitting out there. It was like, you know, I don't know, in total, it was like 50 trucks full because we use it everywhere that we have the ET cover. Oops. What that is. All right, so let's talk a little bit about our winding down the project. So again, we're filling these areas. We're pulling up the haul road right now. So we had discussions with BPAR and they didn't want to use or consider the haul road. So that's all coming out now. These yellow hashed areas are the remaining construction pieces. So we've got the construction of Civic Center, the reconstruction of Civic Center Road. And again, it's going to have sidewalks on both sides, you know, curb and gutter and storm inlets, and of course, all new asphalt. And then these are the original asphalt areas and the original design we had. So this is, you know, we have to replace what was there. We're not asphalting these areas, but we have them ready to be asphalted. But as you guys may recall, we did do some additional waste removals. And so that's the second line here. So there was a change, remove more waste, which included more asphalt. So we have to replace that. And so when we started looking at it, we were like, okay, so you're gonna have these weird lines. There's asphalt back here, there's asphalt here, and we're cutting in this new asphalt. So we worked with Butte Silverbow to develop something maybe that was a little more functional for their longer term plan uses for these parking lots, and extending this area out to here to remove more waste. So when we remove this waste, that apparently what they used as bedding material for the parking lot was tailings. So there's a nice clean layer of tailings right under the parking lot. And it's probably why that parking lot, you know, failed pretty miserably because it's not good compaction. And so what we worked out is we want a good cap over the materials. but we're gonna remove that layer of tailings all around this area and run the new asphalt right up to the building, right? So it's all new to this point. So everything back here is new. And so it's very complicated because we already owed for additional asphalt over here and stuff. But the net effect in a cost perspective is that it's gonna cost us probably about another $90,000 or $100,000 to do this, but we get actual environmental benefit, right? This isn't about just a new parking lot. It's about removing those additional wastes and then getting a good cover over anything that's below that, right? So any infiltration, I mean, covers don't do anything for stuff sitting in groundwater, but they do stuff sitting in the vadose zone for infiltration, right? So we're gonna get a good seamless cover up here. And in the exchange, the lifts of asphalt and stuff and the types of asphalt have changed from our original agreement with Butte Silver Bow. So apparently, and I'm not an engineer, as you well know, there's different types of asphalt. And so instead of 2 lifts of a less quality asphalt, which is typically what's done in these situations, we're gonna get a better quality asphalt and a single lift. So there's advantages for us as the owner of the project. There are clearly advantages for Butte Silver Bow, and there's even advantages for the contractor. But it took us, it's been taking us months to get this all together, sort of where there's clear, we're all clearly getting something out of it. But I think what it allows is this will all be done. So I think I got a figure here of, so this isn't what we're doing. So that's not what we're doing, but that's the plan.
Good though.
What's that? Yeah, you'd like that.
Especially to that south side, because the net effect of the lost asphalt at the county shops, can't you do that?
We're doing a lot down here, John.
No, I mean, the east part there, on the south side of the road, on the
I
east.
think
part.
it's stuff.
You talking about back here?
Yeah.
That's a lot of money, man. That's,
Well,
You're probably under
you got
budget, Jim.
let's go get us going on that.
Savings, that'd be good.
Well, all
Be a
our
nice
state,
little finished project there on the south side, then you're leaving the north side of the county, right?
I know, but we don't need a cap up here because it's all clean. It's all clean. So we're worried about water quality. I mean, you're worried about parking lot. I get it. But this thing is all blue top, so it's
Right.
ready to go. And apparently you guys have been making money off the TV show in here. And so there's a couple piles of money that maybe we'll get there. I don't think it's gonna get all of it, but this is Butte Silver Bow's plan for the parking lots. And so we're just trying to help in this area right here. So what we're looking at is right here, is make it so there's just a clear point here where they can finish to the road. And they'll have their asphalt, there's still all these islands, there's lights, there's, green space like you see in a a more modern parking lot. So there's a good plan here. We're gonna be running conduit to all these islands and stuff, so it could be ready to run the electrical lines. I think Butte Silver Bow has an agreement with Northwest Energy for PUD or something in here to pay for it. So there's a lot of other things that we're just trying to integrate our project within the boundaries of what we're supposed to be doing, which is implementing, a cleanup action and restoration action with their desires for end land use. Again, this is Butte Silver Bow's plan here.
And how big will the non-parking lot parcels be on the north and south side?
Well, I don't think those have not changed. I don't remember what the numbers, as in the original agreement.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's part of our agreement. So we're gonna amend the agreement a little bit to acknowledge this change and stuff here. So there'll be an amendment coming before him. So that's sort of something that we've really been working on here as of late. Here's just some of the specifics of the road. Here you can see, and then this pink is a bunch of the various stormwater. I don't think sewer's on there. We have sewer over here. That's the stormwater lines we replaced. We're moving some of these access points off the Civic Center Road into the parking lots. We had, since you got this new plan, these things had to be modified, which is a change order. We're gonna fill in this area so the slope isn't as steep. So these are all just minor modifications that really don't have any cost impacts, but make a big difference for Butte Silverbow. Trying to think what else that's important here. We're gonna put in a couple sleeves underneath the road, so if we can work out a deal with BP about collecting the groundwater, we'll have a way to get the groundwater across the road or underneath the road without cutting it open. There's no sense building this really nice road and then start cutting it up. So we're gonna leave these sleeves in place, and if we don't use them for a groundwater collection system, they can be used by the developers of these parcels to run other utilities. So part of this plan is we paid Northwest Energy to run all their utilities up to here. Again, we got this 8-inch water line that transects the full road. Trying to think what else there is there.
What is the depression area? Is that significant or is that just
Right here?
no, yeah, well, both of them, but
In the, kind of in the middle of the.
in the
drain.
middle of the development parcel there, it looks like there's
Oh,
a.
this little thing? I don't know.
No, right in the middle of the, it's the excavation.
Oh, that, yeah, yeah, actually, it looks like a hole, but it's actually a pile. So this was some of the fill. See, we haven't dug this yet out.
Mm.
So ICS was storing fill over here. And then when we dug this out, they hauled the fill over. So that's actually a pile. But again, these grading lines are actually the grade through. So it's sort of, it's about 3%, which is, I mean, if you're standing at the bar to the parking lot, you'd see a sliding come, but it's very sliding.
Up to the Texas Avenue.
Yeah, that's right. It's about a 3% slope here. That's what we aimed for on both sides. And that gives us good drainage. All right, talk about money. Right near, we'll talk about just the Savers Fund bounce. And I can't explain like the difference between our cash and Saver Fund balance. This is about where we're at, $6.3 million under budget right now. Now, if you take in our estimates, say this extra 100,000 for the parking lot, 75 grand to Northwest Energy and stuff, take the net effect of all those changes, we're still looking between that $5 and $6 million of savings, but more towards the $5 million. So I would say, you know, a conservative estimate would be like maybe 5.3 million. Is where we think we're going to end up as far as the savings. Now, remember, there was the shops were 14 million or 14.4. So that, and there was like 35 estimated total. So this is going to be, the digging cleanup component is going to be about 16 million bucks, right? So you put that in context, this is, all that materials moving is about 1.9 million cubic yards, $16 million. It's a lot of material for very little money. And of course, as you guys all know, that was made possible because of our agreements with Northwest Energy and others. They'll be able to dump on their facility, right? So we could use really big trucks, not over the road trucks, to be able to dispose of our water over there. And they supplied us with a whole bunch of extra fill. Remember, in phase one, we had about 600,000 cubic yards of extra material that we removed because of high zinc concentrations. And I'll talk about that in a minute, about our criteria. And so we needed more fill. Most of ICS's fill was coming from the valley and would have to be hauled through town. So working with Montana Resources, we were able to get that on their property, not haul through town. So saving all that risk, right, of what would have been, you know, an average 14 cubic yard truck. So you're talking about, I don't know, 70,000 truck trips. Saved all that and used our much bigger trucks, right? So we had 70-ton trucks instead of 14-ton trucks. But that's where we're at right now. It might vary a little bit. We expect this change order with the parking lots, our last change order. So we're narrowing down to, you know, much less uncertainty about where we're going to land. And of course, you guys know that the restoration plan cuts up this savings as a proportion to which accounts it came from. The financed it. So that's already baked into the restoration. It's like there's gonna be a big mad dash and fight over where that 6 million's going. It's already predetermined. But it'll be good for you guys to start thinking about what other, what other projects.
30% comes back to BNRC?
35.
35? Okay.
BNRC, yeah, not the,
The BAO. The BAO.
To BAO.
yeah,
51 goes to the,
51 goes to the Upper Clark Fork, yeah,
and then back to Butte once it gets laundered through that other account.
okay.
Huh?
I'm glad we didn't have the
I'm
meeting
gonna
with
look
Cavalier.
Now go back over there, you've said it a million times, but we get to compete for that money for projects in Butte. And
Yes,
then 14% to the groundwater fund?
yes, yeah. And it's, remember that really busy chart
Yeah.
of all the,
You have maybe you're gonna go through this, you have a total cubic yards, hauled away number?
well, which numbers? So waste, fill.
Waste taken out to MR.
MR, yeah, we have an MR number, again, we classified all that slag as waste, so we throw that in there, but you're talking about 540 maybe of waste. Out of that 1.9, so then we had fill, not as much fill, right, because the whole site came down, then we had all the ET cover materials. So that's the total of like moving all, all that. So the one question we got from Elizabeth, there seems to be some confusion about what our cleanup and fill criteria were for the Parrot tailings. And I know there's a bigger conversation going on around BPSU stuff, but I just wanted to explain what it is that we did at the Parrot. So we have, we use the same streamside tailings criteria that is in the CD for BPSU. But the major difference is there's a footnote there that allows those concentrations to be higher than in the table and requires that there has to be a certain number of exceedances. What we did at the Parrot was we used that table, but we did not use those footnotes. And the net effect, turn over here, John, so you can see, is this is sort of what our criteria look like. So if we had one exceedance of any value, it was waste. So like I mentioned before, in phase 1, we had a bunch of zinc that was below the black clay. So we were getting zinc concentrations anywhere from like 900 to like 1300. But when we were over 1,000 for zinc, then that was waste. And it ended up being a lot of material. And as a number of you know, and Elizabeth certainly knows, zinc is pretty mobile in the vadosome and mobile in groundwater. It wasn't like a shocker, but it was hard to go. But we used any exceedance of any of these values, and the total of these values is 3230. So the mirror image of this was anything less than this we could use as fill, right? So one side of this line, it's waste, one side of the line was allowable fill. Now, I think where some people seem to get confused is what's in, and don't look so much at that. If you look here, these are what the numbers are using the stream side criteria with those footnotes. So you have to have 3 exceedances of the 5 over the criteria, or any one above 5,000, right? So in concept, you could have concentrations up to 11,230 in concept. I think the confusion gets is the fill criteria for BPSU looks like our fill criteria for the Parrot. It's these numbers. So there's a gap between what was waste and what was allowable fill in the CD. They're not mirror images of each other. There is a gap. So I guess one of the question what people were asking me, or was being stated, is that the BPSU CD criteria is the same as what we've done on the Parrot, and it's not the same. It's the same table without the footnotes, which makes, as you can see, it makes a pretty big difference. Just to explain this table a little bit. These numbers here are just a ratio of this number. How many times does this go into this? How many times does this go into this? And we put in like, this is our fill criteria, which is a mirror image of our waste criteria. Here's what Clark Fork River does for fill. Here's Anaconda Community Soils for residential soils or alleys or whatever. Here's some study that Hydrometrics did for the state of Montana, 2013, looking at like background, whatever that means. And we all know that that would be different than Butte. But I just want to make that clear. So I know it's sort of confusing. And this table wasn't really, I didn't develop this table to exactly explain this. I'm just trying to use it to explain it. So Elizabeth, does that answer your question? I mean,
I think it does. I think it answers. So my question to Jim was that we've had multiple meetings where and I know I'm gonna say the dirty word, it's gray dirt, where they said that at the Parrot, we were using the gray dirt as backfill. And that wasn't true. And so I wanted to explain, to be able to explain what we actually used for backfill at the Parrot.
yeah, so our backfill criteria, or what we call general fill, we didn't have it broken up like that, but just for terminologies, is the mirror backside image of our waste criteria, but our waste criteria was different than the waste criteria in BPSU. And so in the table, in the BPSOU, there's a general fill criteria, and it looks like this. But what we're debating about is there's some confusing language or cloudy language in the document itself that calls into question as if this is not the only general fill criteria. And that's what's being sort of discussed, what the interpretation of that is. I mean, I can tell you what it is, but you're going to hear it. So that's what's trying to be figured out with that. But you're right, Elizabeth. We did not use higher concentrations than this for backfill anywhere on the project. And anything over this, we took out as waste. We didn't use this number as waste because we didn't feel like it was protective. So we used those numbers. Again,
And I just want to make that clear to everybody, because I know we've had multiple people come talk to us and it's been confusing. And so I just wanted him to run through that for us so we could.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if that's not really clear. If you guys, one of you asked.
Well, I'm not seeing the difference between column 4 and column 3, the gray and the white. You're
That's right.
that gray one.
Yep.
Right, which is 3 point, they're all the same.
That's right.
Than they are in the Parrot.
That's right.
So if the existing priority soils CD table 2 is gray, that dictates what general fill can be used. How is that distinct from the Parrot?
These aren't distinct. They're exactly the same.
Yeah, they are the same.
It's this that's distinct.
Well,
Yep.
This is a new definition. This is a new definition that's being proposed.
And that's the definition of the gray dirt.
Yes, this is the quantification of what the gray dirt could be. Right?
But isn't the gray the governing document in the CD?
Well, that's what's up for debate. We think the table controls EPA. There is, not to shit EPA, I mean, there is some language that was stuck in sort of late in the process that clouds the complete control of that. Of course, all our numeric standards are in tables. This particular thing is.
I'm also, Madam Chair, I wasn't aware that the total is relevant. I mean, the one exceedance of one of the 6.
So that's
total amount that you could have without having to.
without it being considered waste.
And that's, it's one of these,
What these numbers are.
11s down on the bottom.
Yeah.
So, if a sample of a pile, a cubic yard of proposed general fill for the Parrot, even,
If it exceeded any one of these, any one, it was waste.
okay, and in, under the CD, under the gray now,
3 out of 5,
6
3 out of 5 have, or 1 over 5,000.
is the yellow.
Yes.
What about the gray though?
That
Uh,
the yellow is the gray.
Hmm.
That's the confusing part.
Well, the yellow is sort of what,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. The yellow, hey, don't worry, people have been talking about this for months and they still don't get it, so don't feel bad. The yellow is this new proposed gray criteria. This is what's in the table.
But that's what I have, the
Yeah.
CD table. And then the qualifiers.
Yeah.
If one is over or
1 over
one
5,000,
is,
3, but 3 have to match. That doesn't apply to this. This in the table, under BIPSU general fill, doesn't have those footnotes. Doesn't have those footnotes. And that was intentional on our part. We wanted to look like, we were already designing the Parrot by then. We wanted them to be the same.
So the yellow is worse.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah, you can.
11,000 to 3,000 total
And
concentrations.
particularly it's worse for the copper and the lead.
Yeah, well, and this is an example. You could have, actually could be zinc at 5,000 and lead at 5,000, or, you know, it's any 1 over 5,000 or 3 over 1,000, right? 3 over, so this is just as an example, you could sort of move those around, but as you can imagine, 5,000 in lead, and you know, what the cleanup criteria is for like residential yards in Butte, right? Like 5,000 lead would have its own problems, probably with human health issues. But again, this is fill, right? So where this material is used, it's gonna have 18 inches of different types of caps over. So there won't be direct contact with this material. But our concern is about leachability. So if you think about leachability, right, so these are numbers to protect groundwater. So, right, we built ET caps for protecting groundwater. We removed waste to protect groundwater and protect the creek. And again, these are the same numbers you saw before, but here are different criteria. So here's one for, it's an EPA soils for protection of groundwater. You can see the numbers there. So 430. You can see I got this from Maryland, has their own standards. New Jersey has their standards. And this is what's required for breeze caps. Now, breeze caps aren't really for infiltration, but they certainly help, and they don't have all the analytes. But these are the numbers that you have for protection of groundwater. So you can sort of see even what we had for the Parrot, even what's in there is, you know, on the higher end of reasonableness, you want to call it. So these are the type of numbers we use when we're looking at like designing something or evaluating a design. We look at these other sort of criteria. It's not like we make them up, you know, on a case by case basis. Every project's a little different in how you apply things, but this is how we evaluate it. So John, do you think you understand it? No, it's a
I'm not,
test.
I was not aware of this total number. Everything else I was understanding properly.
Yeah.
Beforehand.
I'll just share one thing that's sort of interesting. It was interesting for me, but it's not interesting for anybody else, but
I don't know, the people have usually added up to show the total. I mean, right, you
Yeah.
actually just, they don't put the total.
yeah,
Just put the total in so you could see.
Right.
Is that, that's not a,
No, it's not a, no.
no.
standard.
No, it's just something.
Places. Now, in
Well,
order
here.
For their LRES, they do use.
Yes.
metals. They call it a TMI.
Yeah, so here it is. So
Oh.
this is what I see. You've worked on it. I just ran across it. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
they use the sum total metals of arsenic, copper, and zinc. That's the sum, so 700, 1200, and then they look at the stress level it does on plants. And then based on that, if you read these parts of it, based on that, they might do more deep tilling, more dilution, more removal. I don't know all the actions they do, but it takes actions. But you can look at, so this is 3,500. So remember, our fill criteria was 32, whatever, 30. 3,500, they say it's very high stress conditions, and that triggers things to be done. So in Anaconda, they do look at tubular metals. And again, this is only 3 of the 5. This doesn't include mercury or lead, which I don't know if lead has a big effect on plants. You probably know. And we know mercury is a whole different game for other reasons. But they do it in Anaconda here, looking at those totals. So there are some relevance to it. But I put the totals on there just so you could see.
Makes it easy to compare.
Yeah, just like it's a relative thing. And we could go through those, each one of those, like Maryland's protection of groundwater or New Jersey, and you could pick and pick like, well, that doesn't fit here and that's different. It's more of like to get a general sense where you're at compared to like what other people have determined as protective, right? So that was a long answer to.
So you required, the Parrot project is done acquiring, fill materials and cover soils and
Yep.
everything? So you're all set, huh?
Yeah, we are good. I mean,
Where'd you get the good black dirt?
mystery, John. Telling people,
No,
it's a secret. I'm quitting and I'm going in the dirt business. No, we came out, we had that project racetrack pond,
oh,
that
okay.
restoration project out there, and an adjacent landowner.
Okay, good.
It's on to ICS, and I think I heard that maybe BP was looking at there too. So it's pretty good material. I mean, there's a lot of material down in Bozeman with all their development, but the trucking's so expensive. Yeah. So, and any other questions?
Yeah, so I'll say pejoratively, the plastic that you put in between the Ulin's dirt and then underneath your top thing, if I understood correctly, the
Yep.
sandwich. How long does that plastic last?
Well, that's a very good question. So I've built a number of these ET covers. Well, I didn't build them, but I manage projects. So we built one out in East Helena at the old lead smelter out there, and I built some in Nevada. And so we used to use crushed rock as that layer, knowing it would last. The problem with crushed rock is you get piping of fine soils into the rock, and then that breaks that hydraulic barrier there, and it sort of like gives conduits for water to flush. So then we started using geotextile on top, and there's issues with that and ripping from the rock. And so this honeycomb stuff, this is the first project I've used it on this, but they use it in road construction. They've been using it for decades. And so it has a limited life if it was exposed to UV, but being where it's at, it should last, from what I'm told by the engineers. I mean, it should last for, millennia.
I don't think so.
I know.
I think that's not credible of what it's made out of. I mean, you can send us what information.
Yeah, I can ask them.
If it is a plastic, okay, if it's like granite or something like.
It's plastic in the.
Yeah, but it's still, you not only, so there's one thing, you don't want the shreds and the little pieces. That's the problem with plastic. He doesn't want it to shred. He doesn't want it to get any holes in it.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's one thing that the plastic is gonna last a long time, but is it gonna last intact?
Yeah.
Okay, it's not gonna last as long intact as it lasts. In pieces.
Yeah.
Shut up. I wasn't talking to you. Or John wasn't talking to you.
Well, I could say, it's a good question. I'd like to see it too. So I'll ask the guys that worked on this design to get us some of the spec sheets where, because people use the for ET covers, they all have the same concern, right? You were building this thing forever. These ET covers are a premium cost, right? There's a lot cheaper ways to build caps, but they don't last long. These ET covers, we're paying the premium up front to reduce our costs in the long term.
Right, but my guess is it's less than 100 years. Okay, I
Yeah.
mean, maybe several decades, but it's hard to see.
Yeah.
And on nuclear waste disposal, I mean, they have these stainless steel tanks and everything, which I bet last longer than the plastic that one has in there. It just,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are concerns like with this fill, this new fill. Like one of the concerns is, as you see in the Clark Fork River and other places, you get wicking late summer. And so if you had clean material on top and you have dirty material like this pretty much is, it could wick up and impact your soils and then eventually kill your vegetation or even run off. And so there's been like, sort of random discussions. I won't say they're like technical discussions I've had with BP about, they're thinking about like, well, maybe we would use like this capillary break to break that hydraulic connection.
and that's what I'm worried. I'm worried that capillary break
Yeah,
does not have the lifetime that it needs, which is a very long lifetime.
yeah, no,
Because unlike radioactive material, I mean, the copper and everything, the lead, the zinc, the mercury, everything that's been contaminating, it doesn't go away over time.
yeah, no. I mean, in that sort of time horizon, that's a valid consideration. I mean, maybe we'll have the magic ray gun by then and we'll just immobilize everything with, shots. I don't know, but I mean, it's valid, but I'm gonna ask the engineers just to get the spec sheets on it to see exactly what sort of testing they've done and how they've done their predictive analysis on it lasting. But my experience has mostly been, I mean, in some places we use slag, like in East Helena, we use slag as the capillary break, which there's, negatives to that, but that's all we had and what we're approved for and whatever. Any other questions?
Any questions online?
Yeah, this is Courtney. I just want to make a quick comment on the dangers of summing. And we all agree that it's for comparative purposes, but, and so I get it. The drinking water standards for cyanide discharge is something on the order of 50 ppm. But if that discharge contains a fair amount of copper, then it drops to 35 ppm. And so there's an example of when you sum 50 is okay, but if it's got copper, then you can't go over 35. I'm just making a comment.
Yeah, no, that's good consideration. These, there's some synergistic issues with metals and it impacts, and especially when you look at aquatic environments, obviously, right? So, but I was just doing this just so you could look across from like what they're doing in Anaconda here, like up on the screen versus this new fill or the fill that's in the table or the Parrot. It was really, I wasn't trying to pass any judgments on it. It was just so you could compare numbers. I mean, I find it interesting, like the Clark Fork, their maximum fill is 484, right? We're up at 3,200 or 11,200, right? And this is aquatic based, so it's actually, this is the same as the vegetative requirements under SECRA for the state. So it's not, and that's not coincidental, right? They just use their numbers, but that's what they're using on the Clark Fork. And I would like to put Streamside in there, but we couldn't figure out what Streamside is filled with, so.
And the
What
number,
did Streamside use? Do you know?
No, I was trying to find it. We're trying to find out, like, we'll add it in when we find it, but I think maybe it varied over time somewhat. I mean, it all came from the Erickson pit mostly, but I don't know if they had like a standard. It certainly, there was no standard when we wrote the rod for Streamside. We didn't have, I mean, we didn't have waste criteria. That was made up, right? So we didn't have fill either.
so that the LRES stuff that they use in Anaconda, the total number there is a tested number.
Yeah.
That they took those constituents in and did the total metals and looked at effects on vegetation
Yeah.
based on those.
That's why I like that. Yeah, that's why I like, because it's sort of something,
And I think it was Texas Tech.
Is that where it was done?
Yeah, I think it was somewhere down in Texas that they did the research on it.
Okay. Yeah, but
So you brought in a certain amount of fill.
Yeah.
You used a certain amount of fill that met these contaminant criteria.
Yep.
How much? So if you'd gone to the Anaconda standard or something, I mean, you brought in clean stuff for everything, how much more would you have had to bring in?
what do you mean by clean stuff for everything?
So you brought in some fill,
Mhm.
fill it, and you recycled
What we
some
could, yeah.
stuff from the site that
Mhm.
wasn't as bad as much of the other stuff from the site.
Yes.
What you used to fill the holes, what fraction came locally, didn't have to go very far. I mean, or, was, at those standards instead of, or did you bring in fill that met the 30?
So, yes, that's a good question. So we had originally the contractor. Let's see, I just want to get to a picture where maybe you can see some. We had, like I told you, we found a lot more zinc over here below. Remember, we're getting that black clay, the highest concentrations, percentages, right? Super hot. And then below that, we had high zinc. So we had a lot more waste in here. So we sort of scrambled, like, that's going to be a lot more, and, another, say 400,000 total more cubic yards that we needed. And that's a lot of trucks. Contractor ICS was getting it from the valley. But what we did was we worked with MR and we found material up on MR's property. Surprise, MR actually has clean material up there. And they gave it to us for free. Now, we had to do a ton of testing, and I'm talking about thousands of samples. But that filled that gap. So it ended up being, Bev, that if material, so again, you don't know what material is until you test it, right? So we use an XRF, we test it, and we determine, is that waste? Is it fill? What is it? So between what we brought back from MR, so we take waste over there, fill up our trucks with clean stuff and bring it back. Between that over there and what we had here, met pretty much all our fill needs. So we didn't bring anything from out of town. We brought a little bit of structural rock for the road from the valley. And then we brought this ET cover material in from out near Rocker and the Yulin Ranch. So this was like, it was about 100,000 cubic yards or maybe 120 somewhere in there. So this all came from out of town. Of course, the soils came from out of town, but everything else we were able to cobble together and source locally, which was the biggest concern was from a safety factor perspective, right? And all those trucks coming through surface roads. So that was our primary concern. But then it also saved us a bunch of money, right?
But the stuff you used for fill, whether from MR or wherever,
All met that
match those
spec.
standards.
That's right. We never moved the requirements for the standards. We kept that the same.
If I can add, the difference between those two different fills, the overburden that was brought in to cover the Parrot tailings initially, that was overburden that was on the Berkeley pit that the Anaconda company stripped off in the late 50s, early 60s. And now the fill that we're getting from MR, that was stripped off of the Continental pit in the 70s and 80s. So it's pretty much the same stuff, just a little bit different areas that they came from.
Yeah, and I've done some presentation on the sampling, so the sampling, we had a full-time sampling crew on the site at our fill areas, and they're out there all day long when work's going on. So they're using an XRF, and there's a field, we can keep it in a trailer actually, but we're constantly grabbing samples, whether it's what's going into trucks, like being loaded here, what's in piles, what the surfaces are. So we're constantly, and we think, so there's a cost to that. You got all these engineers out there. They're usually like the young folks that are just sort of coming up through things. but it really sped up the work. So we think overall that was really a cost savings to do it that way. And the feedback we've gotten from both the contractors was they were really worried it was gonna slow them down, but they wasn't feeling like they were slowing down at all. That it helped, because we could direct and say, okay, you've met this boundary, this is all dirty now, so then you have to start hauling up to the repository. As opposed to it's clean, and you can take that clean stuff from over there and fill a hole over here. So there's no delay, there's no like waiting for analytical results or arguing on the site. You know, because it's not visually based, because some of these contacts, some contacts you can see really well, some you can't see at all. You know, it might look clean and it's dirty, or it might look dirty and it's clean.
So did you say you were obliterating the Hall Road?
Yeah, it's all being pulled up, yeah.
That decision's been made, that we're giving up hope that it's gonna be useful for priority soils?
We begged, John. We begged to, you know, we talked with BP, we had a couple meetings on it. We were gonna haul, you know, we have an access agreement with MR, you know, we got a number of access agreements, right? The railroad and MR and all that kind of stuff. We were ready to transfer that stuff over, save the road and stuff. But that was gonna be a change order. Like, we needed to know, because Dale ICS is using some of that gravel for the blue top. Like, it was gonna cost a little bit, but we were willing to eat the cost. Like, if you guys want to use the road, and they finally came back to us and said, like, we're not going that direction. That's, you know, that's a done deal. Like, we were even looking at, you know, because they were originally planning on coming up over here and then crossing Civic Center Road and then using our haul road. And then we didn't want to build this section of road. Like, we didn't want to build a section of road and then have it destroyed with trucks going through there, right? So we thought, like, well, we'll leave this open, and you guys finish up this little section, you're done hauling. But it appears they've got, you know, different plans. And we're under contract with ICS. It's not like we would have to pay them not to do the work right now, like to stop, and there's no reason to stop.
Right.
Any other questions? Anything online? Great,
Rick?
thank you.
Good job, Jerry.
Lewis didn't have your other.
Yeah, there's just a two.
Yeah, I didn't, I took that off. I just had that.
Yeah.
It's.
Sorry, I didn't know you were presenting.
Never seen that.
That's not bad. Great.
It is, yeah, see, it's listening to it. And typing the other thing he says. Do this for us.
Oh, they're great.
So Pat,
I got one slide and it's on my computer and we're using Jim.
is the typing on the bottom, does that come from the OWL, or is that some different
That's, Teams
team?
transcribes. your-
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of it's funny.
Yeah.
Not perfect. Well, we actually turned it off, but for some reason it still shows up there, but where it's recording it, it's not supposed to be recording it,
Okay.
but it still shows up there, so.
EHIL.
I know, I liked that one. I liked that one.
Filter. Well, I'm finding my one slide. Can we bring Dave up and I'll change computers with Jim? Just a minute.
Sure.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Gotta always have a prop, right?
Gotta have a prep.
My name's Dave Stratton, and I'm here to take the place of my daughter who couldn't be here tonight, Taryn Stratton, and she apologized for not being here. she applied for a grant through small projects. It was in maybe, it was maybe in 2019, maybe, I think it was. It's been a few years ago. She was very lucky. You guys great awarded it to her, was to put storm drain markers on the inlets in Butte. And she made a lot of good progress, and now some time's gone by and nothing's happened. So I just wanted to bring you guys, Pat asked if I'd come give you guys an update, or to have Taryn come in. She couldn't make it.
One update on Karen's project. I don't know if you guys remember, if you were here. I think this was the one and only project that we actually funded for more than she actually asked for. So that's just a little fun fact about her project, just because we thought it was such a great project.
So I'll back up even a little more history. We were about 14, we were in Leavenworth, Washington, and here was a storm drain marker. And she said, Dad, what's that? And I explained it to her. It's spring awareness, so people don't dump oil in antifreeze. And so her first question was, why don't we have those in Butte? I said, well, nobody's taken the initiative yet. And so she said, well, how would we do that? And I kind of explained the whole funding process and raising money. And it wasn't trying to downplay it, just reality. And lo and behold, a few months later, here's this article for small projects. And so I says, well, I'll help you with the maps. I says, but you're going to do it yourself. And so we did. And so she did a little pilot project, presented up here. And it was to just do, I think, about 200 or 300 markers on Park Street, the main streets in Uptown Butte. And it was awarded, and went out and knocked it out, and the job went perfect. And then I think she did a follow-up, and she said that someday I'd like to do all the markers in Butte. And that's, they said, well, give us a cost, or you guys said, give us a cost. And she did. And so then it became a big project. And so she took a lot of pride in it, and, setting these markers, and I've got some pictures and I'll show you, but she wanted to make sure they were set right. They weren't, something was just going to fall off or end up in the storm drain. And I tried to encourage her to get other kids involved. She says, Dad, most kids will, they'll goof off, and, we want to do it. So the problem is there's a lot of markers. There's like 2,500 markers. So we were making good progress, and I was helping her. That's what us parents do. And then this COVID came and hit. So I was trying to get her to get more groups, and she was organizing some, and that all happened at the same time. And needless to say that the project, she'd line it up with a group, and then, the media would say, okay, everybody needs to stay away from each other again. And so we had 3 or 4 startups on install projects, and they all got shot down. And then she was getting frustrated. And so I told her, I says, it's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. We'll keep whittling away at it. And we did a lot of neighborhoods and made a lot of progress. And then she graduated from high school and college. And so like anything, once you kind of put it away, then you got to start it up again. And so in order to push this through and get it done, she needs to recruit groups. And I've talked to Pat about this, and he's the same thing. The problem is we live in Montana. No sooner you get everybody gathered and the skies cut loose, and so, we get wet rainstorms or snowstorms. You have to do them in good weather. You can't do them in the middle of winter. And so, what I want to do today is, talking to Pat, we want to organize to get more groups together, and it works best 2 people. One for a safety. You're on the street, so there's a safety aspect to this. We wear orange vests, but one person's on the watch out, because people don't pay attention, and it's nice to have somebody watching your back while you're bent over. And then one person gets the spot ready, and then the other person could put the adhesive on the pucks, and then you can stick it on, and that way you get less stuff on you. Every now and then you get a little on you. So I got a couple pictures here. I guess I can pop this in here. Maybe not. This is for the. Oh, wait a minute. Is that a? No. It's just not, I got too fat of a USB drive. I might be able to get in there.
Maybe I can pull this in from mine.
Will that shut the big monitor off?
Wouldn't mind. I gotta give my slide anyway.
Okay.
Back on. Get the thing on
Uh-huh.
No. Yes, there we go. But then this probably isn't hooked up, right?
So that's still running off there.
Did you call before?
Is there even anybody online left?
Courtney's still there.
Courtney is.
Hi, Courtney.
I'm seeing Parrot Tailings Waste Removal Fund.
Exactly.
Is that your problem?
This is what one of the pucks were, she's installing. She came up with the design for it and put it together and had to go, like I said, as a parent, we help what we can, but I told her it's your project. And so she had to do the costing and get estimates, and she did a good job, and she was only about, 15 doing it. So she was doing adulting. So she got that all put together, got prices and come up with the design. And
How old is she now?
she just turned 20.
Yeah, I
So-
remember when she presented.
Are you connected to the Teams meeting too, Pat?
No, it's running off.
No, but you could
Yeah.
actually, if you connected to the Teams meeting and gave yourself permission to share from your computer, they could see it online too.
I'd have to get on the internet and everything.
Yeah, I don't know, it's really nice. I've seen them on the pavement. On the sidewalk.
Yeah, you seen a lot of them. You guys have done a good job.
She's done a really good job.
We got more to go. Thank you.
And he's looking for volunteers.
Did you talk to the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts?
Yeah, not necessarily those in particular, but,
No, they.
when, well, yeah, she was involved with the youth leaders and all, but that all happened during the COVID. So now it's time to,
Right.
that's why Pat asked me, because we needed, just like anything, you put it away and it gets dust on it. Now it's time to dust it off and get it going. So,
That's what he was saying.
and she's totally,
And then-
Oh, but is it?
still interested in finishing the project, doing what she started.
It's just not,
Yeah. they will.
I didn't think about the width of the thumb drive.
yeah, oh, yeah, it seems like a pretty
Yeah.
good.
Jim, you were on HD.
And Dave, you were saying that these are lasting as advertised?
Yeah, they last good. Well, that's part of what I was gonna talk about was, it's not so much them as the locations. So, we did a lot of learning too, which is, so sometimes a project gets postponed a little bit. But there's advantages because you learn about it, you
Tell me about that. There's a lot of dead trees on the hill that.
So,
Snow removal. That's the hard thing.
well, what was interesting when we first put them out was theft. Because there was no snow, there people were stealing, like the one in front of when it was Hennessy's Market. That one got stolen 3 times before there was even somebody just saw it and they were scraping it off the sidewalk. I'm like, we hadn't anticipated that. We knew there'd be collateral damage with snow removal, but not, so people were stealing because they thought they were cool. So it might work in here that both those cables together. Let's try that again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just.
About a month ago, I had a public meeting.
I can't get that back. There we go. Now this. In there far enough?
I don't have any speaker, so she. It's just like. Thank you. I said, well, I'm sorry, you can hear my computer playing.